you will classify the homeless video on college kids in California as ethical research, even though we are not sure whether approval was obtained from all these college kids. Do you think he compensated them for their time and effort? It wasn't stated on the video. Take a wild guess. I didn't know it. I don't know. So I ask you. Do you think the interviewer compensated the college kids?
I guess probably not.
But that's still an ethical research because informal approval was obtained. If not, there will not be a YouTube video, right? Okay. So here, if you go to week 13, can you find that? You go to week 13, you go to ethical issues in research.pdf, click on that. If you want to look from your gadget, or if not, you can just look on the board. So this is what ethics is defined. Maybe, yeah, you learn that in your other class. Or if you Google the word ethics on Google or on Dr. Bing, you find the same thing. And with respect to social research, including research for sociologists, ethics involve the proper or improper way of doing research. And as researchers, we've been through this briefly. We have ethical obligations to our participants. We've been through this before. Let's say Destiny. She wants to interview victims of sex trafficking. She has obligation to protect her participants. She has to guarantee or ensure that no physical or psychological harm is being incurred on her research participants. This is what we mean by this paragraph. Are we clear? Let's say another more outrageous topic. Let's say we want to study the health and well-being of undocumented migrants. We know it's not right, quote unquote right, for them to be here. But when we are doing research, we have to quote unquote guarantee to them by saying that we will not report you to Homeland Security or Immigration. That's another manifestation of ethical research in social science. Are we clear? And let's say we want to study victims of spouse abuse. We interview some women and they are still living with their spouse. And we know sometimes we struggle within us in this regard. We know it's the right thing to do, to report, but because we have ethical obligations, we are doing research. So we have to say to them, we have to guarantee by saying that, yeah, we are going to make sure that we are not going to report to the police, and we are going to ask questions in a way that minimize psychological and physical harm to you. It's always our responsibility to safeguard the health and well-being of research subjects. This is what we mean by ethical research. That is why I asked you the video on homelessness. Was that a proper or improper way to conduct research? He did not get formal approval, so you have to think within yourself to decide. When you see a vlog, now there are many vlogs. Vlogs are also visual ethnographic study. Sometimes, not always. On YouTube, we have to decide within ourselves whether that study is ethical or not. Whether the YouTuber or whoever posted the video use proper way to conduct his or her study. Remember. And research ethics is not a new thing. It originates because of two famous issues. Experiment experimentation of prisoners of war by the Nazis, the famous one. And the Japanese, they did the same thing when they occupied the entire Asian Pacific in the mid-40s. I mean the early 40s to the mid-40s. Japanese doctors, they did experiments on their prisoners of war, Asians. So because of all these incidents, infamous incidents, and the Takeuchi, I cannot pronounce, syphilis experiments. Did you read this in your history? The Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Did you learn that in history?
We don't learn a lot of like what happens in America that's bad in history. Like I didn't learn until my like junior year of high school about Japanese internment camps and other like gross things America has done.
So none of you learned this before in your other classes in college. Doesn't ring the bell. So there are bad things done by many countries. North Korea today, even though their media is highly censored, we know. Nazis, Japanese, other countries. I read when they conquered Kuwait in the early 90s, they did bad things to their prisoners of war. Before you were born, I was in 11th grade back then. So because of that, proper guidelines came out to serve as benchmark on how people should conduct research, how academics and people who work in government institutions or hospitals, other places, on how they should conduct research because of all these bad instances. And then they have what the Nuremberg trial. It was publicized partly through the Nuremberg trials. And because of that, now we have research ethics. Prior to that, researchers prior to World War II rarely have any guidelines when they conduct their studies. So now, in almost any research methods course, you have to learn about ethics, including public health. So, research ethics is a broad and multi-dimensional concept. One dimension talks about voluntary participation. Researchers cannot coerce people into participating. Researchers cannot bribe the subjects. Researchers cannot say that I give you a $50 gift card from Amazon. I want you to fill out this survey. No, it's unethical. Remember that. Researchers cannot do that. But there were instances, not in the first world country, but in some Latin American country. I read those case studies in grad school, long time ago. Maybe things improve now. One of the international organization, I forgot whether it was UN or World Bank or WHO. So some public health representative went into those countries, and that's what they said. It was a family planning program, reproductive health program. So some of these representatives, they literally said to the women, because it's a poor country in the 90s, they said to these women, if you fill out this survey, who receive free prenatal care, free prenatal screenings in different aspects from all these organizations, they literally told these women, if you want free screening, if you want free medication, if you want other free stuff, you fill out this survey at the end of the checkup, at the end of the screening. It's unethical. That is why it became a case study. Because we have to be mindful. even if we build rapport with our subjects, research subjects, they are still strangers to us and we are still strangers to them. So we have to make sure that we conduct our study in an ethical manner to safeguard their health, well-being, and other mental health aspects is our duty. So we cannot force them to stay for the survey until the very end, the very last question. Just because we need to collect data is wrong, is unethical, is very wrong. So our research subjects can leave the study can live in the middle of a survey, a study, if they don't feel comfortable. If they feel that, oh, I'm going to record something I don't want to record, I don't want to do that, I want to leave. We have to give them the leeway to leave. We cannot coerce them to stay. And even though sometimes, I'm sure maybe you experience this, some researchers, maybe they were funded by grants, sometimes they provide gift cards or cash incentives to participants who completed the survey. So we have to uphold voluntary participation. Even though we can give gift cards, other incentives to those who completed the survey, are we clear? We cannot say to our research subjects, no, you have to complete the survey in order to get a gift card. No, we cannot put our sentence that way. We cannot say things this way. It's unethical. So if they bother to remain and complete the gift card, we can say, yeah, now there's a link for you to enter your email address and somebody will handle that because we got to get guarantee confidentiality and anonymity. Then you will get a gift card soon, in a few days or what. But we cannot coerce participants to stay until the end and promise them any incentive. It's very unethical. And we have to guarantee no harm to participants. These are the famous cases. So, there was a commercial for a new product that sells steroids to baseball players. This is from your optional text. You may not see. But they did not disclose everything. The symptoms, negative symptoms associated with steroids consumption. They just advertise the positive things. So many baseball players, they bought into it and they consume this brand and something bad happens to them because they did not disclose everything. They only disclosed the positive sides of steroids. They did not disclose that steroids contain this GBL, I cannot pronounce. And these can have detrimental health implications to all these players. They did not disclose that after they conducted the experiments. They just wanted to sell the products. And obviously, maybe some of these players, after they consume the product, something happened to them. Maybe there were lawsuits and complaints and whatnot. It eventually became a case study because it was publicized. So this is very similar to the Tuskegee syphilis experiments. The doctors did not disclose everything back then. It was prior to World War II. It was made into a movie. I don't know if you all saw that. I know some people in public health or nursing, they had to see this movie in one of their classes. So in the movie, it was portrayed. The doctors, it wasn't entirely their fault. They got the instruction saying that they were not supposed to give the drugs to all these African Americans who contracted syphilis. They were just instructed to observe them, quote unquote observe them, to see how they progress from one stage of disease to another. And eventually maybe it got very severe and maybe they died. They were instructed to observe the patient's progression of disease and not to give any drugs. So it wasn't ethical, we all know. And that's what the doctors and nurses did. They merely followed instructions. And many people, if you saw the movie, some died, some got really severe, some turned into other alternative traditional medicine. They burn incense or what, with the hope that they will be cured. So these steroids, the product, they did not talk about the side effects like vomiting, aggression, seizure, or whatnot. Apparently, athletes experience some of this bad stuff, and they complained they were losses. And in my opinion, all research, all study, all proposal has some kind of psychological harm to various extent to our subjects. Some, they are very minor, almost non-existent, but they still exist, just very minor. Some, they are very severe. We have to acknowledge all these potential psychological harm to our research subjects. Let's say Destiny wants to interview victims of sexual trafficking. So in her proposal, she would have to acknowledge that her subjects may be subject to certain psychological harm when they recall certain things, how they were being kidnapped or captured or whatnot, what led to these events. It's going to trigger a lot of emotional issues on part of her respondents, right? And she will have to acknowledge that. And if she does not acknowledge that in her final proposal, I will take points off. The same for all of you. And I remember I had two mini grants. One from Delta State is on the general public satisfaction with the health services, whether it's clinic or the few hospitals in the Cleveland area. We don't have a lot of clinic or mobile clinics even, or even hospitals in Cleveland. Dialysis centers included. Because many African Americans, they have diabetes. So it seems to me at that time, maybe not much psychological harm would be incurred on part of our respondents. It was a grant in collaboration with my ex-colleagues. But when I submit that for approval, for IRB approval, we will talk about what is IRB later. The person in charge of IRBs turned down our proposal before they submit to NIH. And she said, when respondents recall certain bad experience with doctors, nurses, health providers, it's going to trigger certain emotional responses. So there are still psychological harm to a very minor extent, and you got to acknowledge that in your proposal before we submit it. And based on this experience, so I learned this myself, even though at the time I was a professor. I thought maybe psychological harm wasn't involved in my study. Apparently we were wrong. And I got another small grant when I got hired at UNK. It involved students from allied health, nursing included, their perceptions on simulation-based learning. So in studies like this, when respondents, they talk about their experience of simulation-based learning, whether it's helpful or not, whether it can supplement clinical based learning or not. Because now there is a shortage of clinical professionals. So people are thinking of maybe using simulation based learning to complement or supplement for them. So based on my experience at Delta State, this time I knew respondents may have some bad experience with IT professionals. In all these infrastructure machines, they try to learn on or maneuver. Maybe IT personnel or even their instructors weren't that helpful. So it may trigger some emotional responses on their part when they fill out our online survey. And I knew this time I got to acknowledge that. So based on this experience at Delta State, now I believe that there's psychological harm, whether it's a great extent to or it's a very minor extent. No study is free from psychological harm. That's my stance right now. And sometimes bodily harm can also be incurred on part of the respondents. Not so much in social science research, but in pure science research. Maybe they have to touch on different things. Some are real hot, some are real cold. It appeals, it involves their senses. So bodily harm can also be incurred on part of the respondents. And I was on a committee to safeguard the well-being of animals. So research ethics applies to animals as well. I'm on this committee right now. From my first semester until now, they put me on this committee. And I review proposals from biologists, essentially. When they use certain rats, different kinds of rats usually, or certain rabbits, or certain flying creatures, usually birds, they have to guarantee that the birds, the creatures, the rats are not scared, not stressed because of all this intervention being applied to them. If they are going to be stressed or being scared, researchers cannot avoid them, the biologists cannot avoid them. They have to properly acknowledge that in their proposal before it gets approved. So there's usually committees pertaining to ethical research in universities. I think there are at least two committees. One pertains to humans, one pertains to animals. And one study, I don't know if you recall that, is on homelessness. It talks about drug dealers in New York, somewhere in New York. When we talk about ethnographic study, we talk about that ethnographic study in New York. So, in this case, respondents, they have to trust the researcher to report, to acknowledge, to admit whether they are using drugs or whether they are dealing drugs. It is a very sensitive topic, right? So, I bet the researcher, when he wrote the proposal to get funded to go study this kind of thing in New York, he had to acknowledge that it will incur some psychological harm on part of his respondents, even though after he built trust and rapport with those people, they are still exposed to psychological harm because they are going to admit to him whether they are dealing drugs or using drugs or not. It's a very sensitive topic. It's one kind of deviant behavior, and it's unjust or unethical on part of the respondents. They have to really trust the researcher to report this kind of thing to them. And researchers, we want our findings to be as accurate as they can be. So, for our findings to be as accurate as they can be, we need to abide by research ethics, do things properly. Are we clear? famous example. This is a product called Feminine Forever. Usually, case studies involving unethical research, they came from companies. Maybe partly because companies, they are under so many competitions among other companies who produce the same thing. So sometimes, I will not say they can't help it, but they still have to disclose their research procedures. If they do that, maybe their products will sell better than their competitors. That's my 2 cents. But some companies don't do that, we all know. And this is a feminine product that claims that they can prolong the menopause process for women, delay the menopause process, or even prevent it altogether. They claim that women, if they use this Feminine Forever, they will get menopause at a much later age, or they will never get it at all. That's what they claim to market their products. And apparently, some negative ramifications happens to the consumers. There were lawsuits as well. And they did not disclose other unexpected findings. And if you follow this case, they only tested this product on white women. And we know, if you took a course in biology, in psychology, or in the health sciences, or in my social 462, we know the genetic makeups for different racial ethnic groups differ. So they only tested this on white women, and they market this for women of all racial ethnic groups. Of course, some of these women, white women included, are going to experience some negative implications, negative consequences, because they did not disclose everything. They did not disclose the negative results. If you Google this and follow this case closely. So this is another example of incurring harm to respondents because they did not fully disclose their procedures when they report their analysis or data. So people thought this product could actually do wonders. So in any type of research, we run the risk of harming our respondents in some way. That's my stance right now, based on my experience at Delta State. Even in, I think for all of your research, if you actually conduct your research, you are going to incur psychological harm on your subject in some way or another. I think more than my kind of research. That's my take. Based on the things you wrote in your discussion posts or assignments. So you have to acknowledge that. Because for my simulation-based study, we had to acknowledge our limitations. Or we have to acknowledge the potential psychological harm. Maybe people have bad experience with IT personnel. It affects their learning process. This touch on mental health to a very minor degree, but we still have to state that on our proposal to get it approved and funded eventually. It is our duty to protect our participants, even if the risks are very subtle. Now the only thing I can think of is our simulation proposal that just got funded, and it ended last May. And we have to guarantee respondents' anonymity and confidentiality. We cannot use their SSN, or their full names, their real name, or just their last name and first name, or our database. If we do that, if we use their SSN as ID, it's very easy for them to be identified. Or even if we use their last name and first name, or just the last name. This is especially so if they are from a minority group, and if the percentage of minority groups are low, in certain places. If they disclose they are from certain minority groups, and there's only a handful of minorities in that place, that small town, they can be easily identified. So we always have to create another identifier. We can have the name. Usually we don't have SSN. We can have the name, the email address. Because if you want to give out gift cards at the end, we need their email address. And sometimes we can identify them based on their email address indirectly. So normally we create a separate ID. We have the computer generate a separate ID for our respondents to safeguard anonymity and confidentiality. And if we want to give out incentives or gift cards at the end of the survey, we have a different person handling the gift cards. We ask them to send their email address to another person so that we don't have information pertaining to their email. That's another way to safeguard anonymity and confidentiality. Are we clear? So you can read about definitions of anonymity and confidentiality. Those two things have two meanings. Anonymity means is unable to track the respondents based on their last name or their email address or other info, their race, their gender, their age. It's almost impossible to track the respondents back to their community. That is anonymity. And confidentiality means we promise to keep their information private. Make sure you know the distinction between the two. Don't mess them up. Are we clear? Read them on your own. And we should not use deception when we do surveys. And this is what we mean by deception. Mislead the respondents, give false information like the steroids product and the family forever product. They misled the respondents. They gave false info. And they omit certain information, like the family forever. The marketing folks did not disclose that they conduct their lab experiments only on white women. So you can read these two cases on your own. And because of what happened with the Nazis and Japanese during World War II, and because of what happened during Turkish G-syphilis experiment, the federal government created the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, to review, to have certain professionals. Usually professionals are stationed at the universities. Sometimes they ask professors to serve on these boards, to review proposals, to make sure that the researchers in those proposals, they indicate somewhere in their proposals how they plan to safeguard the health and well-being and mental health of their subjects, be it human beings or animals. The IACUC is the IRB for animals. This IRB only applies to human beings. The IACUC is, we call that the IRB for animals. So, when we review proposals, we look through from the first page until the last. We want to see if there's anywhere in the proposal where the researchers is going to acknowledge that there may be some psychological harm and how they are going to counter that. If they cannot counter that, what they are going to do. And one way to counter all this psychological harm would be for respondents to leave the study anytime. At the point they say they don't feel comfortable, we allow them to leave the study. That's one way to minimize if we cannot prevent altogether the psychological harm on respondents, we allow them to leave the study. And we warn them beforehand. We have certain sections written, whether it's paper survey or online survey, we pre-warn them in bold letters or block letters. Certain psychological harm they may experience by taking this survey. And sometimes it's okay to use deception in certain instances. If it incurs no harm to the respondents, it's okay to use deception. If that's the only way, we can conduct our surveys. We have no other alternative to study this topic. This is the only way, and this involves deception. We have to go by this way, and we have to acknowledge that. Always be honest. So, if we want to learn about decision-making practices among physicians, sometimes it's okay to just mention that we are studying communication behaviors. We tell them something more general or more obvious.
So is using a placebo, like a sugar pill in research, is that like an example of deception that's like okay to do?
I think people use that all the time.
Yeah.
There are two groups, one the treatment group and one the placebo.
Right. But if the placebo group like thinks they're taking a treatment, like is that an example of deception that's like okay?
Yeah, sometimes if they are not getting the treatment, they are not being helped in any way. And I think it's partially ethical. That's my take.
Okay.
And Sandra may disagree with me. But, okay, if there's a treatment and there's a placebo, and people benefited more from the treatment,
Yeah.
whether it's an intervention, it's a new job training program or whatnot, and those in the control group, they had a placebo, they are not benefiting. I would say it's partially ethical. But can we circumvent that? Can we do away with the control group?
I don't think so.
Okay, can you think deep again? Think one more time.
Get rid
We
of
always have to have treatment and control. That's the thing.
I don't think we always do, but for some cases I think so.
Okay.
It's good too.
And if for a drug, like the steroids or the feminine forever, the placebo may be better off in this case, right?
Yeah.
They are not being harmed.
Yeah.
And the treatment may be harmed in this case.
Yeah.
It's equally unethical. So can we do away with treatment and control? Have everybody experiment the new intervention or the new drug or whatever, the new program.
I don't think so.
Okay, would comparing people in different time points be another alternative to do our study? We have this intervention, this time period, and depends on the topic, maybe you're right. And we compare this, what's the percentages, what's the numbers prior to this time point, whether they increase or decrease depending on our policy, intervention or program. Can we do it this way instead?
I don't know.
Or we're answering a different research question if we do it that way?
I think that might be a little different research question. Because then it's more like how does the like length of time that you're doing the intervention or the treatment, how does that affect you rather than does it affect you or does it not?
Because if you think back to the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, if you think this way, sometimes I feel that all these African Americans in one of the southern states, I don't remember which one, they are essentially being used as a placebo if you think of this way, right? Maybe doctors in other states in America during those times, maybe they were treating maybe African Americans in the northern states. And in the south, doctors were just instructed Atlanta, Georgia. I think it's Atlanta, right? Maybe people from other racial ethnic groups, they were actually being treated for syphilis. I think it's Georgia. But people in this southern state were just being observed. They were essentially being treated as a placebo. So is that completely unethical or partially ethical? What's your take, ladies? Is that a deception? Placebo?
I think it is deception, but I think it would be like an instance where it's okay because it's not harming. If you're giving someone a sugar pill or if you're, it's not like harming them. And sometimes it can do better for them than the treatment.
Because in their mindset, they think they are getting something,
Yeah.
not the sugar pill.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sometimes mental health is connected to physical health through the biomarkers or genetic makeups. And they think they were getting something. And yeah, we may see some changes in their physique. But in the syphilis experiment, do you think it's deception? Do you think it's outright unethical or partially unethical? The doctors gave false info
That would definitely
back
be
then.
deception that's not ethical then.
Those patients with syphilis, sufferers of syphilis in the 40s, they were not informed that they were just being treated. They were not being informed, that they were just being observed, not treated. And they were quite illiterate in those days. If you watch the movie, they were not very educated. If you are educated, you will notice at some point something wasn't quite right. And in the movie, one guy had syphilis. He went to the military, and they gave him physicals, and that's where he got treated from the military. They gave him proper vaccines in the military. He came back a fine man. He exposed all these things. He was more aware. So they were misled. They were not aware that they were just being observed. And maybe job training program. Maybe there are two interventions and two different interventions in two groups. One is better, one is not so good. And maybe the effects may be different years later. This may be partially unethical, but sometimes we cannot help that. If we compare different time points, we know many things can change across time and context, right? And maybe sometimes it's better to compare two or more groups of people within the same time frame, same context. Sometimes we cannot help it. That's a good question, or excellent question. And people still do that in consulting firms when they wrote their grants, and if it's funded, they have different job trainings for different people, economies. In my old consulting firm, they did that, even to this day. And the family forever is another example of deception. We all know that. Any questions so far? And nowadays, some people, especially computer scientists, or people who are good in programming, or people who know big data, they say we can do away with placebo effect. or control group. We can give everybody the experimentation, the treatment. We can program, we can create a fake, quote unquote fake, or pseudo set of respondents. Pretend they are control group, pretend they did not get any treatment, and we compare everybody who are assigned to the treatment to the control group. What do you think of that? Can we do it this way? We program a fake set of human beings, essentially. We instill fake characteristics, demographic characteristics, social economic characteristics on these respondents we just programmed to serve as our control group. Now people do that. Even in consulting firms, they are funded. Would that be a better way? Or we still need two groups of actual human beings?
I think we still need two groups of actual human beings. And I don't know, because maybe technology is like, I just don't think that any human being we create is like gonna be exactly like a real human being, or will react exactly like a real human being. But maybe with the technology, they will someday. But I don't know.
Yeah, some programmers, they do that. They just program a fictitious control group and they instill certain characteristics on this group to serve as control group. And then they compare. They give the treatment to everybody. So, we are not obligated to our research subjects. We are also obligated to our audience, whoever are going to read our studies, findings, reports. So, we always have to report truthfully and fully, disclose any shortcomings, not only report the positive things or positive results, no brain. We also have to report negative findings. This family forever did not do that. So it became a case study, or is still a case study now. We study that in our research methods classes. This study lacked proper control. Apparently there were no control group. So it's also unethical. They only tested on white women. It's also unethical. White women from high income group, white women who were healthy with normal weight, and they sell their products for all women to all women. Obviously, there were going to be all kinds of negative consequences and health implications because they did not disclose negative findings. And sometimes, this is another case in a website called Car Reliability. This survey is not publicized. So we don't know how all these cars are being rated because we don't know how the survey is being conducted. So usually the survey we want to use, like this is the famous survey archive at U of Michigan. Most of these survey archived or stored in this website. You click on find data. They always have a description on how the surveys is being conducted, or they have a whole report of hundreds of pages on how the study was being conducted, how the sampling was being done. Usually sites like this are more credible. And that's the proper way to do research. We have to disclose how the surveys are being conducted. So because of that, people were unsure of how cars are being rated from this website. That's another example of deception. People don't fully disclose anything on their analysis and reports on car reliability. So any questions so far?